Thursday. Tomorrow's Friday. Here's Chris.
So, I need you to help me figure out a mystery, okay? I spent several hours today figuring out how to communicate something to you guys that I think is probably in a lot of people's minds. And then it just disappeared when I was writing it. And it makes me wonder, maybe I shouldn't have said it. Of course, there are a lot of other reasons about ridiculous levels of incompetence, but that's not for you to worry about. But it is important enough to say that I'm going to explain it to you anyway. Maybe it was a sign, but I'll ignore it, okay? The fundamental question is, are you here to help? Are you helping? Is whatever you're doing helping? Do you find yourself asking that in your own life? I know I do. More and more as I get older. Professionally, sure. Parenting, partnering, relationships. Is what I'm doing even calculated to help? Does it even have a chance of being helpful? When you look through that lens at what's happening around us, it's kind of a head scratcher. Columbia University. The kids up there, you're not helping. Wearing headscarves, hiding your little privileged faces, looking like little baby Saddats. You're not helping. Saying we're all Hamas, you're not helping. First of all, if you really mean it, you really want to identify that you're a member of a designated terror group? You want to see what comes along with that? You want to see what real outrage is? What a system can really be about? Keep calling yourself terrorists. See where it leads you. Not a good look for your school either. No wonder the head of your school seemed so off balance in front of Congress, not able to explain how all these radical ideas have found their way into an Ivy League institution. How there seems to be so little balance of thought. Now look, I have no problem with you protesting. I think you got to stop saying it's your First Amendment right. Columbia University is a private university. They have their own rules. The First Amendment, I guess you know this because you got into an Ivy League college, right? Is for government and what government can and cannot do. Oh yeah, but the police, your university asked for the police because you're out of control and you're advancing messages that don't help. Oh, but the Gaza is suffering. Yeah, it's real and disgusting and it's got to stop. You think you help by wearing these stupid scarves on your head and saying that you're members of Hamas and shouting at innocent Jewish classmates? As if they were the ones dropping bombs? As if their religion, their blood is somehow offensive to you? No, it's the acts of the great oppressor. Hamas is the root of all of the pain here, every bit as much as Israel. And if you should know anything at this point in your education, it's that you do not look for single-factor explanations for complex situations. And that's what you're doing. You are not helping. What you're doing is not calculated to help. You are not helping to end the suffering. You're making people think Ivy League institutions are part of the problem. And to the extent that you guys identify as Democrats, which I don't know why you do because you don't even vote. If you want to help, vote. Why don't you vote at like 60, 70, 80, 90%? If you want to help so much, why don't you do something that could help? Raise money for the people who are suffering there. Go and volunteer. If you want to help so much, then do it. Help. And protest is a great tool of our democracy. But you got to think about what you're saying and why you're saying it. I'm angry. Great. You want to appropriate the suffering of a people that you don't belong to. That's fine. Happens to be the American way. But you are not the students of the 1960s. You better stop selling yourself on that proposition. You guys come at me with it all the time. You are not freedom fighters. You are not supporting the efforts of people who are fighting for civil rights for minorities in America. You are not the rebirth of that. You are backing a terror organization. That's what you're saying. We are all Hamas. The hell we are. We are anathema to Hamas. And that's why this situation is heading toward an attack of the head of the snake, Iran. Are you going to back them too? It's interesting how you guys had to get a little quiet. You know, you retooled what you're about now. You're back to Palestine, sticking to Palestine. You want to talk about Hamas. So what, do you support Iran also? Do you support Iran? You support them, do you? Well, I see it online. I interviewed a guy on my podcast who's saying Iran is fighting against the oppressor. Really? Really? Millions and millions of followers he has. He's at the forefront of your generation of people making an impact online. They are the worst of the worst. Hamas is their puppets. If you want the suffering to stop, don't identify with the bad guys. Now, I'm not saying you all have to get in line with the IDF. There's plenty of criticism for what Israel has done, is doing, and what they must do. But you got to think about whether you help. And I don't know how you can look at what you're saying. I don't know how your parents can look at what they're paying for you to do and think that you're helping. I really don't get it. Now, on a lighter side of this, I don't get how the Kennedys think that they're helping. This family, now you know, right? My brother was married to one of Robert F. Kennedy's daughters. They got 3 beautiful kids. And I've gotten to know a number of them, and they're very special people. They do tremendous things. But they have always been known for their strength and solidarity in pain. They've suffered unimaginable pain, and we know this many times over, of all different varieties. But they've always stayed together until the battle to stop Trump from a second presidency. And now they split, and the Kennedys, I don't even know what a family endorsement is, by the way. Like, I didn't know that that was a thing, but I guess if you're going to have one, the Kennedys are about as unique a family in American history as you'll find. To go against one of their own, brother, cousin, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Now, look, I don't know that Bobby can win. I don't know that he is even qualified to win. But that's not the point. I have him on here because the parties are poison, and they have to stop having a death hold on our democracy because they don't help. The parties aren't helping. And I don't know. Look, that's my former sister-in-law, Carrie. I love her. I think she's great. She's got an amazing heart, an amazing mind, and amazing kids. And I get that she is of pure purpose and righteous. She always has been. But does this help Biden? Or does this just show that even the Kennedys are not immune from the division that our politics has created? I mean, if you think about it, beyond just it being weird that it's her brother that she's campaigning against, something that I can't even fathom. But if it's important enough to her to do that, is the point that Bobby's that dangerous? Is that what you're saying? Well, no, because you're really supporting Biden and saying we need it to be Biden to beat Trump, not Bobby. Does that help Biden? I don't know. I don't know that any of the things we're seeing around us are even calculated to help anymore. You can't think that coming out against your own brother is going to make undecided voters think that Biden's a better choice. It's just going to make them think weird things about you, probably. So I don't get it. I just don't get whether things are calculated to help, and if so, how so? I see it in our government all the time. I see it in everything happening us. I see it in other people who are on television, what they've been doing with this juror process in New York City. I get that there are people who believe Trump can't get a fair trial. I don't agree. Okay, I know that Bill O'Reilly and others can wave their hands and just assume that everybody in New York is just a crazy, biased lefty that hates Trump. I think that is ignorant in the main and cynical as well. And maybe it's because I'm a New Yorker and I believe in my people. And I don't know that New York has ever been known for being intolerant. But now they've picked a jury. And you got Trump and his puppet pals in the media trying to get their names out there and doing things to them that put them in danger. What the hell is going on here? How is that supposed to help? How is that supposed to show that he's a leader, that he's somebody that you should look up to when he's trying to submarine our own system again? How does it help? I just don't understand. And I think you need to be asking yourself that question. Instead of, which do I prefer? Which is least sucky? What is my opinion? How do I want to feel? Try thinking about these things through this aperture of, is this person, is this situation designed to even have a chance of helping? Because that has to be the guiding principle in the rest of your life, right? Sure, you fall short. I have a stunning ability to repeat mistakes. But underlying all of it, for all the frailty, for all the flaws, for all the failures, that I really hope I can get better. I really hope that I can help the people that I love, the people that I'm in contact, the people that I care about, what I care about doing. I just don't think that we're asking the question enough anymore, because if you do, the answers are going to fly at you, because it's all so obvious that so much around us can't be calculated to be helpful. It's about other things, darker things, selfish things, but it's not about help. What we're seeing on that campus, they're not trying to be helpful to anything but their own egocentric cause of righteousness. It's all around us. Ask yourself the question, the answers will come. Now here, I try to interpret these things through the news of the day and through the dynamics that they represent. And I think it is a good thing that in New York City, they finally have a jury of 12 and an alternate for Trump's New York City hush money trial. It was becoming poisonous, that process of why they were throwing people out and the speculation and how it was driving the politics. Bravo to Trump and his team, by the way. You did a great job of making a lot of people who probably already agree with you and maybe a few more think, yeah, our system sucks. Good for you if that's what you wanted to accomplish. So there's a jury. And here's what we know about them. Remember, this is my theory. Can you get a fair trial? Yes. Yes, you can. You can in this case as much as you can in any. Is he definitely going to get the hook? I say no. I say it's a weak case. I say it's a misdemeanor case. Now, O'Reilly was saying last night, we haven't even seen the discovery yet. He's not a lawyer, okay? There's plenty of stuff out there that we've seen in the indictment and why Bragg brought this for me to know what I think about the case, which is that it was a misdemeanor case in the main, and I think Trump is going to beat it, not necessarily through an acquittal, but I think that for all this talk about how they can't be fair, you're going to have one, two, maybe more who just don't see it, and they won't go along with the rest of the jury. And by the way, that would be a signature New York trait. And as we all know, in a criminal trial, it only takes one holdout, right? And you hang it. And there is zero chance that Alvin Bragg is going to have the political will around him to bring this case again. I can't believe that could happen. So the jury, 7 men, 5 women. Many of them say they get their news from the New York Times. All right. That ain't that helpful either. Okay, that place has as much of an agenda as anybody. But there are also some who go to Google and go to TikTok. So we're going to look at one juror that Trump's team probably likes. Juror 2 is this male investment banker. There are actually 2 big shot lawyers on there too, by the way. He's read The Art of the Deal. That is Trump's signature book. He didn't write it, but that's his book. And he has an account on Trump's Truth Social app, okay? So why didn't the prosecution throw him out? That's a good question. I'm glad they didn't. I think that just because someone has feelings about something, especially when it comes to politics, especially when it comes to Trump, doesn't mean they can't be fair. Now let's look at one that the prosecution is probably counting on, to the extent that one juror matters. Juror 11, female, said previously that Trump is a selfish and self-serving man. Members of his own family say that. Given that only 1 in 10 voters in Manhattan went for Trump, is that the sole metric of whether or not you can get a fair trial? Let's ask the better minds. We have jury consultant Richard Gabriel. We got defense attorney Mark Garagos and former New York City Assistant District Attorney Paul Callan. It's good to have all 3 of you here with me. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Paul, I know you best when it comes to being a practitioner in New York City. How do you feel about these suggestions that politics will overwhelm the ability to be reasonable for all New Yorkers? So it is impossible to get a fair trial for Trump.
I agree with your opening statement, which is kind of what that was. And that is, he can get a fair trial in New York. And, the proof of it is when you try criminal cases in New York, guess what happens? The majority of people who commit violent crime in New York get convicted in Manhattan. Even though there are left-wing people, there are very liberal people who sit on those juries, when they get into the jury box, they apply the law and they try to convict the guilty. And if he's guilty of this offense, there's a good chance he's going to be convicted. I think his best shot is he might get a hung jury in this case. But in any event, it'll be a fair trial.
I don't think he's going to get convicted.
The evidence. Yes.
I believe you about the fairness, and I'll tell you one quick story, and then, Richard, I want to come to you about the antics surrounding the jurors, the likes of which I've never seen before. I was on a jury once. It was a buy and bust case. And on the jury, this is not a joke, this actually happened. On the jury, there was a Columbia University professor who decided to just nullify all of the evidence because of his feelings about cops, even though the case was crystal clear. And he just would not let go of it. So in my mind, the stubbornness of anything is going to be in favor of doing what they believe is right, even if it defies the facts and the law. Richard, in terms of what we saw surrounding the arguable exposing of jurors that Trump and his pals, even on the media, didn't like, have you ever seen anything like that? And what do you think the net effect was on this process?
No, I mean, it's the problem has to do with intimidation, and I think that's the most critical part of this process. The judge has tried to make these jurors anonymous to make sure that they feel secure, because there has been threats against judges, against attorneys, and can be against the jurors. So in order to not influence them, not to jury tamper, you have to have a preservation of their security there. So that's unconscionable if somehow their identities are being released into the public, because it does put them in danger, and it puts the whole process in danger.
Mark Garagos, if from the defense counsel side, how are you feeling about this process coming into it and the jury that they got?
Well, I'll just tell you, I couldn't, I don't want to say I couldn't disagree more with your opening statement, but I would beg to pause and give you a alternative viewpoint. The idea that somehow this case being tried 120 days or whatever it is before the election in New York City, which where Trump is reviled, and for anybody to think that this does not have political overtones and that it isn't going to influence the jury, it may be the single most naive thought I've ever had. And let me tell you why I say that. So it's not, I was just in Arkansas last month, as you know, Chris, and I was reminded of a trial I did there 25 years ago with Susan McDougal, Bill Clinton's erstwhile business partner. And I tried that criminal case in Little Rock, Arkansas. And she had criminal contempt counts against her. The one thing that we did in jury selection was figure out who was a Democrat, who was a Republican. That jury hung. And that jury hung exactly by party affiliation on the criminal contempt counts. I'm going to tell you right now that there is no way that this jury, when they're not sequestered, is going to give him a fair trial. They can't do it. You saw what happened to two of the jurors today. Their names got out there. It became obvious who they were. They couldn't, they told the judge, frankly, we can't be fair. So absent sequestration, no, he can't get a fair trial at this time in this venue.
Why didn't he sequester him?
I would have been screaming bloody murder. If they're going to claim they need to try this case now, out of the 365 days in however many years it's been since this happened, if you've got to pick it right now before the election in a polarized case like this, then okay, Judge, that's fine. Sequester the jury.
Yeah,
I didn't hear a request, though, to sequester the jury having been made by anybody in that courtroom. Was a request made, Mark?
Not that I'm aware of. It's mind-boggling to me, because you saw what happened today, Paul. You saw what, and which is totally expected. In these non-political kinds of high-profile cases I try, the exact same thing happens. People, when they get fired up, whether it's a Scott Peterson or a Michael Jackson or any of these other cases, even Winona Ryder, the media is in such a frenzy that people end up, if they're not sequestered, they can't help but be infected by the, whatever the virus is that's going around.
But Mark, just to get away from the sequestration issue.
Go ahead, Mark.
For a moment, Paul. Here's the flaw in your analysis. Trump has been attacking Judge Merchan unmercifully, attacking his daughter, attacking his family, attacking his court employees. As you well know, Mark, jurors identify with the judge in cases. And this kind of an attack on the judge is going to blow up the Trump defense. And it's something that doesn't happen in other high-profile cases. We're always careful to not anger the judge unnecessarily because we know how jurors like the judges. And I want to see how this is going to play out. I think Trump is destroying himself with his stupid remarks attacking the judiciary.
Well, look, he was...
Richard,
he has,
go ahead. Mark, give me a comment, and then I want to go to Richard.
Sure.
I would just say, obviously, Paul, neither you or I would let a client do that. So I get you. I understand.
Right.
It, I don't think, takes away from the fact that absent sequestration, this isn't the right way to do it.
Yeah, that's why neither of you guys would ever be on Trump's team, by the way. And that's why he always has a bunch of lunch meat around him, because you have to be willing to do whatever he says. And Mark, while I'm always open to you disagreeing with me because you're smarter and you make me better, I don't think this case should have been brought. I don't think it should have been brought now. I think it's telling that the feds passed on it. I think it's corrupted by politics. And I think because of that, the overall atmosphere is very prejudicial. I just believe in the people of New York more than they've been given credit for. But I agree with all your other points. Richard, the judge can the judge unilaterally decide to sequester the jury? And how does that change the dynamic when you take people and take them out of their lives for the process of the trial?
It's an additional hardship, and so you may even lose jurors. At this point, it's a done deal because some of these people just can't do that. They've got kids to take care of. They've got other lives and stuff that they have to do. So at this point, it's a done deal. It does affect them because it isolates them. It does protect them from some of the prejudicial media. But I do want to push back a little bit. There are influences. We know about implicit biases. We know about confirmation bias. We know that people search for things that they already believe. That's true. And yet something actually pretty miraculous does happen when a jury of diverse citizens gets together and actually sits down and tries to work together to come to a meaningful verdict. That does have an ameliorating effect of basically dispelling a lot of the bias there. Are there perhaps some hidden agenda jurors on there? Possibly. Are there people who may have some really strong opinions? Could there be a hung jury? Absolutely. But the truth is, a group of 12 people getting together and really having to listen to each other, listening to the evidence, and conscious that they absolutely could be affected by bias. There have been jurors in the January 6th case who've been Republicans and have convicted those defendants. There has been in the Paul Manafort jury, a woman was interviewed who said, I support Trump. I didn't want the charges to be true. And she said, but the evidence was the evidence. Great things happen when a group of people get together. It's one of the beauties of our jury system.
I agree.
Can I just point out one thing? But Richard, that applies to convictions. The only time you're going to find acquittals in a high-profile criminal case, take a look. Casey Anthony, O.J. Simpson, the jury was sequestered.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think that Manafort and the January 6 cases were a lot stronger than this one. This is not an impressive case that Alvin Bragg has brought after the feds passed on it, and it reeks of politics. It's hard to understand why it's worth it, and I just don't understand why Trump is behaving the way he does. He doesn't need to be his worst to show that this prosecution is not the best. Paul Callan, good to have you. Mark Garagos, I felt like you could have disagreed more, to be honest. And Richard Gabriel, always good to have you. Thank you, each and all. To be continued. And I don't think this one's going to take a long time. 4 minutes, 5 seconds. Coming up, Stephen A. Smith is here. He has very strong feelings about this, along the lines of what I'm saying. Now, he sees it differently. I just don't like the case. He believes it's not about the case, it's about the election. And he wants to talk to us about that. And I want to ask him about this new wave of activity with betting in sports. I've been waiting for this because of all the DFS stuff and all of the stuff that everybody's doing now, betting with all the games and all the different options. Are we in for a really, really dark time when it comes to sports betting?
To my liberal friends out there, all you're doing is showing that you're scared you can't beat them on the issues and the merits.
Let's bring in Stephen A. Smith. It's good to have you. Continued success, not just on ESPN, but with your show, Stephen. It's great. I hope everybody is watching your show.
Thank you.
I want you to make the case with this as the setup. But he did it. Now, I don't like the cases in New York. I didn't like the AG's case. I don't like this case. But the overarching concern is he did these things. How can you just let him get away with it? With that basis, how do you see the situation with prosecuting Trump?
I'm not an advocate of anybody getting away with crimes. I'm a man about the law. I believe in obeying the law. And if you do the crime, you need to do some time. That's my mentality. If crime is what is called for as opposed to a civil penalty or what have you. My issue, Chris, is this. I'm of the mindset that you're not going to get him. That no matter what level of guilt you can attach to him, it's not going to equate to jail time. It's not going to equate to him being removed as the presumptive GOP nominee and the Republican candidate for the presidency of the United States. So why are you continuing to politicize all of this by using the courts, using lawfare, as a lot of people call it, to engage in this kind of battle with him to take him down, as opposed to preparing yourself as a party to go up against him? I think the argument that's being made against him, where the courts and politicians are using the courts, clearly they're doing that. That argument that's being made against him, it's foolhardy because it's not working. You know, I've had Democrats reach out to me and say to me, shh, be quiet, don't say anything, because you're a voice, Stephen, and you resonate with folks, and please don't tip people off. Let us do what we do. Well, damn it ain't working. You're losing momentum before our very eyes. He's winning in 6 or 7 polls last time I checked, at least a week ago or so. He's gained momentum. And my point is, when you got 4 indictments and 91 counts and 2 impeachments and civil suits that you've lost in excess of $454 million in terms of the rulings and everything else, but he still keeps marching forward, gaining momentum. What are you going to do about it? I in no way meant to give any kind of impression that if he did a crime, he shouldn't pay the price. What I'm saying is you can't seem to get him. He seems to be Teflon. So the only way to get him is to beat him. And they don't seem to be able to do that either. And I'm quite disgusted by it, to be quite honest with you.
I won't give up his name, but a guy who you and I both know, who is a legend in hip hop, called me and said, I know you won't say this, but here's what you should say, is that it took the over-prosecution of a rich white man to show how easily the system can be abused. And that black men and poor people have been put up on cases for generations just because the system could and wanted to do it, even though it wasn't really serving any greater good and lives have been lost. But now that it's Trump, there's a 2-tier justice system, and we have to fight back about the maladministration of justice. And you know what? He was right. But
absolutely,
Trump, with these 2 cases in New York, he is getting too much credit for being victimized because these cases in New York suck so bad. That Georgia case is a different case.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Demanding, looking for, looking for the votes. Trying to get a certain number of votes.
Hold up, and said, you got to find me the votes.
And change. You got to find me 11,000 votes. No question. That is a different case. But right now we're dealing with the one in New York. And that hip-hop artist who called you, he's right on the money. And not only that, here's the sad part about it, Chris. It gives credence to the argument Trump made during a speech weeks ago where he talked about black folks relating to him and his plight. Now, what the hell would black folks have to do? What would they have in common with a guy that was born, on third base thinking he hit a home run, born with the proverbial spoon in his mouth? It's the legal system. Because on many, many occasions, when you see some of the notable figures from African-American communities throughout this nation that did everything they could to create change, including the late, great Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., you saw how the law was manipulated or how law enforcement was manipulated to assist in bringing people down. That's the belief emanating from the black community. And so when you see Trump speaking about that, what's more appalling, believe it or not, than him actually saying that is us sitting back and acknowledging he has a point, because the Democratic Party comes to the black community, and I can say this because 95% of the time I voted Democrat. The only time I've ever voted for a Republican is when I voted for Chris Christie for governor in New Jersey. That was it. So I can say this. I'm looking at a Democratic Party that looks at the black community, that says, we're there for you. We're there for you. We get where you're coming from. We've got xenophobia. We've got homophobia. We got transphobia. We got all of these things that have taken a priority and elevated in a level of importance over racism. But when it's time to vote, you want to talk to black people about what you're doing for them and how you're looking out for us and how you are on our side. But this man right here, who's the the presumptive GOP nominee, is in a position to literally get back into the White House, because what you're doing to him, we find eerily relatable to things that have been done to folks in our community, and it's happened for decades. There's no escaping that fact. And Trump pointing it out and being accurate in doing so is perhaps the height of embarrassment for the Democratic Party, in my estimation.
That is too strong a point for me to now talk about betting in sports. We'll talk about it another time. Stephen A. Smith, I appreciate you making your witness here. I am one of the I want to be known for this. I've been telling Stephen he had to expand his portfolio of thought for you guys for a long time. We need voices like his. You make a lot of sense to a lot of people. Thank you for doing it on my show tonight.
Thank you, man. Always a pleasure, buddy. Take care.
All right. Stephen A. Smith, one of one. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. So 4 suspects in custody for the murder of those 2 moms from Kansas that happened in Oklahoma. The grandmother of the kid seems to be the mastermind, according to authorities. Are they 1 suspect short? We got information for that on you. Plus, we'll show you just what this caper was about and how they thought they were going to get away with. Brian Enton has it for us from the scene. By the authorities as being the head of it. A man named Paul Grice, though, was listed in the court documents but not arrested. Now we understand he was brought in and interviewed and released. What's the deal? And what do we now understand about what these people plan to do with the people they murdered? NewsNation senior correspondent Brian Enton is in Oklahoma, has more. Take it away and take us through this.
Yeah, Chris, you're right. Paul Grice, his name is in the probable cause affidavit. We have learned that one of the suspect's daughters told police that Paul Grice was also involved in the murders. And our sources confirm that he was brought in for questioning. He was taken into custody. He was questioned, but then he was released. Apparently, there was not enough evidence to hold him. We spoke to his landlord and former employer. This is what he had to say about Paul Grice.
Did you know Paul Grice?
Yeah, I know of him, and he has a young family, very nice guy. He's the kind of guy to come up and shake your hand, tell you hi, and anytime I've been around him, he's just been out cleaning and working hard and taking care of cattle, and he seems to be a good guy. My understanding is that he was taken in and questioned, and apparently the OSBI and FBI didn't think it warranted arresting him, so I guess he's not in custody, so I have no reason to believe that he had anything to do with it.
So apparently not enough evidence to hold Paul Grice. Chris, we know that he's still in town. And just like that man, his landlord, there are a lot of people are standing by him saying, look, if he hasn't been arrested, we're not going to judge him at this point.
It also means that the people they do have in custody didn't include him, because if they did, that would have been enough to trigger an arrest. And they don't want to arrest somebody if they're not going to be able to hold them, because you don't get that many bites of the apple. What have you learned also for us quickly about what they did with the bodies here and what it tells about their plan?
Yeah, so we know that they took the bodies 8.5 miles away from where the car was discovered. We went out there. We got this exclusive video from someone in the area. They buried the bodies 10 feet underground, Chris. It's near a dam, and then they actually spread hay over the bodies. We're told the hope was that the cows would come over into the area and disrupt the area and sort of make it less suspicious. But through the cell phone tracking, through the pings of the burner phones, that's how police were able to figure out that that was the spot. They dug, they went down 10 feet, and they discovered the two women.
Brian Enton, as always, you are getting us more. You are getting deeper, and you are helping. Thank you very much. Appreciate you. 3 minutes, 45 seconds. Up next, 100 people arrested today on the campus of Columbia University. Pro-Palestinian protesters. Why are they saying we are Hamas? Oh, it was just one of them. No, it was a lot of them. And there were people standing around with white faces saying nothing when they were saying that. Independent journalist Matt Taibbi has a take on that and this drama at NPR and what it means about freedom of the press. All right, let's bring in independent journalist Matt Taibbi of Racket News. Good to have you, my friend, as always. So I had Yuri Berliner on. I believe that he was coming in good faith, that he had good faith concerns about groupthink of the lefty extreme variety at NPR. They suspend him for what I believe was probably legitimate but fugazi reason, that he didn't ask for permission. He then resigns. Then Steve Inskeep, famous name at NPR, writes this kind of serial rebuttal on his Substack that I felt was selective in defending NPR more than it was trying to address what Yuri's concerns are. Then today, there's a letter from the staff that comes out that is basically an admission that they want as much wokeness injected into the process of how NPR does business as possible. What is your take on the situation and how real any concern is?
I think even more shocking than Yuri's original article at the Free Press was the reaction of the staff at NPR. A lot of the things that he brought up had nothing to do with politics or wokeness or even left or right. They were really more just down the middle ethical concerns about how you practice journalism. For instance, you can't ignore a story because it, quote unquote, could help Trump. That's whether it was Trump or Biden, you can't make that calculation. The issue there isn't left or right. It's just not reporting a newsworthy story or putting on a source that you have concerns about, like Adam Schiff, 25 times, when you increasingly feel that the evidence is not supported, as he described in his piece. Those are just standard issue factual reporting problems. I don't think Yuri Berliner is anti-woke or to the left, and nothing about his background suggests that. And for the staff to try to cast this as a partisan attack and an attack on who we are and an attack on the whole idea of trying to diversify, I think is kind of shocking. It shows actually the groupthink that he was talking about. It actually brings it into greater relief, if anything.
Yeah. And again, I get why people who work there would be pissed off, especially if they believe that they are not part of what Yuri is talking about. Everybody got painted with the same brush. I get that. But in that letter, I mean, you tell me, Matt, you got a better mind on this. But it seemed like they said, hey, we don't like the way you reacted to this, bosses at NPR. And we want to talk about DEI. We want to talk about all these affinity groups and that these things are supposed to be more a part of our editorial process. And it seems like this guy's complaints got more attention than this. So it seemed like they heard what he said about his concern about groupthink of the progressive variety, and then they basically demonstrated the desire for that kind of groupthink.
Right, and this has been kind of a feature of sort of the modern newsrooms lately, and I hate to say this because I was always the kind of person who was out on the side of the staff always in any kind of dispute with management. But there's been a lot of the sort of inmates running the asylum vibe that runs through journalism these days, where there are a lot of demands that are being made of editors about, what we can and cannot cover and what the general directions of organizations should be. That's why we have editors, and that's why journalists do journalism. Mm-hmm. And what ends up happening when you have that situation is that neither does their job. The editors don't edit, and the reporters don't report because they're so worried about the overall direction of the organization and what message you're sending. I mean, I was trained, I'm sure, Chris, this is the same for you. I was trained not to care about the political impact of anything I reported on. It was, however the story turned out, I'll do it. It's up to the viewers to figure it out. And they've gotten so far away from that it's sending a message that I think is going to be very difficult for them to kind of rescue the brand of NPR, which had a great brand for a long time.
Mm-hmm. I think there's opportunity in every challenge, and not just to make a bumper sticker out of it. But one thing that we have seen too often is that management locks up and gets into protection mode. Whether it's what we just saw with USC with the valedictorian or what we saw at MSNBC over Ronna McDaniel, they get in protect mode, and then you don't know what's going to happen. And there's very little bravery. Where I've seen it a lot, and we should talk about this another time on the show, is with Bobby Kennedy. I don't think that Bobby Kennedy has any real chance of winning. I don't even know that he should have a real chance at winning. I have him on because I'm not going to let people who pick sides on the two parties tell me that they get to run the game and that this guy is interrupting the game and he's making it more likely that one of the other, two teams loses. So he's got to go. And even his own family seems to agree with that. To me, it's like, no, it's not about Bobby. It's about what he represents in terms of these parties don't get to control us. And it seems that the media is happy to play part of that game as well. Everybody's picking sides, Matt. Last word from you.
Well, I totally agree with you there. I mean, I covered presidential. I think I've covered 5 presidential campaigns, and I've been on the bus listening to journalists talk about how, well, we think this person is a viable candidate and this person isn't, and we're going to signal that this way. And they liked having the power to kind of sort out who gets a lot of attention and who doesn't. And I think that's a tremendous insult to voters when you think about it. Like, you should give everybody the benefit of the doubt. This person could win if their ideas are presented correctly and they're represented accurately. But journalists liked having that kind of power over the process, and they liked the idea of being, sort of behind the rope line with one party or another. And I think that's a very big look for journalism. I totally agree with you on that. Yeah.
The too many in the media default to access. And instead of just being there for the audience. That's why I love what you're doing, Matt Taibbi. That's why I like what what Schellenberger is doing. It's good to have you guys out there. A lot of people on the independent side, they're just brands trying to make money and get clicks. You're the real deal. Thank you for being on the show with me. We will be right back after this break.